Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Otis. I have 31 years of law enforcement experience. I'm here today to give you an introductory on criminal justice. My background experience is going to lie in the form of law enforcement and in the correction system. I do apologize for the low light. And hopefully something is going to be said you may already know. Something may be said that you don't know. I will ask that if you have questions, I don't mind pausing and answering your questions. I do apologize for the way the setup is. We're going to start out talking about the criminal justice system and what the criminal justice system is. The criminal justice system is just the system of law enforcement, the bar, the judicial system, corrections, probation, and they all work directly together for the apprehension, the prosecution, the defense, the sentencing, the incarceration, and the supervision of a suspect or persons charged in a criminal offense. I'm going to say the same thing over, but I'm going to say it in a different way so you can understand what I'm saying. The generic term for the criminal justice system, it's to monitor criminals, investigate them, arrests are made, evidence is gathered, charges is brought, defense is raised, trials are conducted, sentences are rendered, and punishments are carried out. And it sounds like a lot of work, but when you really look at it, I'll show you that it's just not one different agency that is carrying out these duties. If it was one agency, then it would appear to be a lot. As I said earlier, my experience lies in the law enforcement portion of the criminal justice system and the correction portion of the criminal justice system. In a nutshell, criminal justice is the system in which crime and criminals are detected, detained, tried, and punished. That is in a nutshell. I said a lot earlier, but in a nutshell, that's all it means. Normally, people that study criminal justice, as yourself, you're going to seek a career in law enforcement, probation and parole, public defender's office, maybe going to be an attorney, corrections officer, something dealing in forensic, but it opens up so many other doors and so many other avenues once you get a degree in criminal justice. If you can see this chart, these are the basic steps in the criminal justice system. The first thing you have in the criminal justice system, the crime occurs. That's when the criminal is out, the criminal does something of a criminal nature where he or she can be arrested. The second step in the criminal justice system is the investigation. That is when law enforcement or the detectives arrive and an arrest is made or a citation is issued. Then you have your initial appearance. This is when you appear in court. Evidence brought against you is going to determine whether you're guilty or not guilty. Now, I know I'm going a little fast on this. I will recap a little later. Then you have what we call the PE, or the preliminary hearing. This is where once you make bail, or if it was a citation, you appear before the judge. The judge hears the evidence to see if there is enough to charge you. At this point, if it is, you will go into the arraignment and the plea. From the arraignment, one or two things can happen. That's when you hear, do you plead guilty or not guilty? We're not at the trial portion yet. We're just at arraignment. If you plead guilty, we go from that straight to sentencing. If you plead not guilty, and I say you, but I'm not really talking about you, I'm talking about the suspect. We go from not guilty to discovery and plea negotiations. One thing you need to know about a trial is very, very expensive. Later in my presentation, I will show you how we start out with a maximum number of cases and how that dwindles and how these cases are non-prossed or thrown out. But from the negotiation portion, you go back into the trial. From the trial, you're going to either get a verdict of guilty or not guilty. If you get guilty, we back on this side, you go back into the sentencing. If it's not guilty, then you're released or placed on probation, whichever will go with the case that is being handled in the courtroom. There are three main components in the criminal justice system. Three main components in the criminal justice system. You have the law enforcement. That is your uniform officer, that is visible, that is out. You have your court system. The court system consists of your judges, your public defendants. Then you have correction. Your corrections, again, is your jails, your prison. Three components, main components: law enforcement, courts, and correction. These three components work together to prevent and punish devious behavior. They all work together. But your law enforcement function is the most visible. It is the most visible. Normally, the law enforcement is what you're going to first see when criminal activity is conducted. Typically, this is the first contact that a criminal has with the system. Law enforcement. You have your police patrolling your community, trying to prevent crime, the investigating of the incidents or the crime. They arrest the people that are responsible for the crime or suspected. And once a person is arrested, once they are arrested, they enter into the court system. Here's the order of the process. Law enforcement first, the person is arrested, then they enter the court system. Your court system consists of your attorneys, your judges, and your juries. This is your court system. And in the court system, the guilt or innocence of the suspect is determined. And they are still a suspect at this point. They are a suspect. After the evidence is presented and weighed, you have to have evidence presented and weighed. And after the suspect becomes convicted, well, I won't say convicted, during the PE, the preliminary hearing, once the evidence is presented and weighed, if there's enough to hold the person for the charge, now the person is no longer a suspect, the person is a defendant. The person is a defendant. And it offers the opportunity for the accusers to come and sit before that person that they have accused of a crime. And this is where it's lost a lot in the court system, because a lot of people want to press the charges, but they don't want to sit before the person in a courtroom and tell what happened. That's one form of why a lot of cases are thrown out. The person do not want to face their accuser. So at this point, the accuser, if there's not enough concrete evidence, physical evidence, this person will either be released or this person will be found to where he or she has committed the crime. From there, if a guilty plea is found, if a guilty verdict is found, the suspect again is sentenced, punished, and this is based on a criteria set by the judge and statutes. What I mean, criminal justice, there are different laws, and it's hard to get a conviction. I'll hit on that a little later in this presentation. But after the defendant is sentenced, at this point, the defendant is turned over to the correction system. And if you follow me on this, we started out with law enforcement. You go to court, the judge sentenced, then it goes to correction. The correction system is incorporated with different forms of sentences and punishment. It includes the incarceration, probation, and parole. They falls under the correction system. And a convicted criminal is the responsibility of the correction system until that person serves their full sentence or their charge is commuted, their charge is reduced or thrown out. And again, corrections include the prison system, the jails, probation, and community control officers. That is your house arrest. Louisiana has the highest incarceration rate in the country. Louisiana. And Caddo is tops. At the scene of a crime, I wish you could really see my slides, but I do apologize. But at the scene of the crime, hey, maybe if I would have made all my letters yellow, y'all would have been able to see them. But at the scene of a crime, law enforcement has a variety of roles, but their main goal is to solve the crime and apprehend the suspect as quickly as possible. Police officers investigate each type of crime differently, and much of which depends on the severity. I would not investigate a shoplifting call, a theft of beer, the same as I would a homicide, a murder. They're not the same. The severity level is so much different. At the initial part of an investigation, there is an interview. This is when the police at the crime scene begins to process and solve the offense by asking questions. You have always, you have a lot of bystanders standing around. Everybody see and know what happened, but nobody really wants to come forward. But it's in the hands of the law enforcement, which are the first responders, to gather as much information as possible, and this information has to be correct because it will determine how the case turn out later when it goes before the judge, the jury, and the attorneys. And these questions are always aimed at finding out details of the who, what, when, where, how, and why from those involved or those that are standing nearby your witnesses. At the investigation portion, this is when the detectives get involved. I said earlier, uniform officers are your first responders, and the information that they gather is very important because that determines the outcome really of the case once it gets to court and evidence is being presented before the judge and the attorney. But the officers has to look for physical clues, and this includes real small items such as hair strands, fingerprints, and evidence like bullet casings. If there are surveillance cameras, all of this can later be used to determine whether a person is innocent or guilty, because this person will have an attorney, and their attorney will be trying to make this person be perceived as being innocent. And on the defense side, which is your suspect, again, their attorneys will be working to try to have most of this evidence, the bullet casing, fingerprints, hair strands. They do not want that type of evidence submitted in court. Your first responders are very, very meticulous, I would use that word. When you see yellow tape, they do not want you to enter that crime scene because you can contaminate the evidence that's within. I've always said when I was on the street, you can always make a crime scene too small, but you cannot make a crime scene too large. You can never make it too large. But while you're interviewing and investigating, it's extremely important to secure the crime scene. That typically entails roping it off with your large roll of police tape that says crime scene, do not enter, and it's to ensure that all the evidence collected is preserved and not contaminated. And again, the public cannot enter that area when you see it roped off like that. So it's always a good idea to make your crime scene as large as possible, because you can always come back and make it smaller. A prime example, if a person used an automatic weapon and they're driving in a car and they have this automatic weapon outside of the window, those spent shells are going to be, they're not going to be in one place, they're going to be scattered over an area. You don't want anybody to come in and picking up those shells, because the person may say the person fired 50 or 60 times, but if somebody come along and pick up most of the shells and you only find 3 shell cases, and I'm talking about the law enforcement officers, or if you're working in forensic, then that's going to weaken that person's case. The purpose of a criminal investigation is to gather evidence to identify a suspect and support an arrest. An investigation may require a search, an exploratory inspection of the person or their property. If it requires a search, you must have a search warrant. You cannot go on anybody's property and search without a warrant. There has to be probable cause. Probable cause is the standard of proof required for the search. And probable cause means that there are facts or apparent facts indicating that the evidence of a crime or criminal activity can be found in a specific place. Your probable cause. An arrest involves taking a person into custody. You are physically handling this person for the purpose of holding this suspect or person until court. Again, probable cause is the legal requirement for an arrest. You cannot arrest a person based on a gut feeling just because you know that person committed a crime. You have to have probable cause. Probable cause is the legal requirement for an arrest. It means that there is a reasonable link between a specific person and a particular crime. And this word reasonable means it's a standard for what is fair and appropriate under usual, unusual, or ordinary circumstances. Reasonable. Police officers operate under very stressful and dangerous situations and environments. Officers witness traumatic events. You know, when I first got on the police department, if nobody told me what I would be experiencing, I would be a first responder responding to scenes where somebody put a gun in their mouth, blew the top of their head off, and I'm the first responder. I have to secure the scene. I have to make sure everything is okay. First person on the scene, gunshot victim, person shot with a shotgun, their intestines are out, but the person is not dead. First responders, you have to make sure this person is as comfortable as possible. How you do that? You're not trained to do that. You're really not, but you are exposed to these type of things until the fire department gets there, until other people come and take control of the scene. You're the first person there. And nobody, nothing can compare you or prepare you for what you will see. Again, I said they witness traumatic experience. They're working deaths. They're working 40 hours or more. It is a very stressful environment being a police officer. A lot of paperwork is conducted. A lot of paperwork. This paperwork has to be meticulous. It has to be factual. You cannot put anything in a police report that did not occur, because later you will see that report. The attorneys on both sides will see that report. The judge will see that report. And that report is a permanent record. 10, 20 years from now, you could still go and get that report. And if your credibility as an officer or an attorney, if it's ever compromised, then your record as a credible person is going to be shot. You have the prosecutors. Prosecutors of criminal defendants in the district court. These are the people that decide whether there is enough evidence to even take a person to court. The prosecutors weigh many factors, including the seriousness of the offense and the strength of the investigation. If you go in a courtroom and you have a suspect for bank robbery, and the only thing you have is a little old lady sitting in a car across the street, and that is your only witness, then your case will be real weak. Let me speed this up a little bit. The criminal justice system is like a funnel. I said this earlier. You can start out with 1,000 serious crimes. 1,000 serious crimes. And at the top, you will have these 1,000 people. It funnels down. By the time you get to the bottom, you will only have about 5 juveniles and 18 adults that's going to be incarcerated out of 1,000 serious cases. Let me tell you why, and I'm speeding this up. If you can see, we'll start out with 1,000 serious cases. Out of that 1,000 serious cases, 500 of them are going to not be reported. People won't even report them. Pigeon drops, that's one of the cases when people lose their money because of greed. That's the only way a person can get you for a pigeon drop. Then they don't even report that. But you have 500 that's reported. Out of that 500, 400 of those crimes are unsolvable, cannot be solved. So now you have 100 people out of the 1,000 that's going to actually be arrested. Out of that 100, you have 35 juveniles that's going to go to juvenile court. But out of that 35 juveniles, only 13 of them going to be put on either probation or dismissed. So out of your 35 juveniles, only 5 of them going to be incarcerated. I told you earlier, it's very expensive to try a criminal case. Let's go back over to the adults. You'll have 65 adults. Out of those 65 adults, 30 of those cases going to automatically be dropped. You'll have, 30 will be automatically dropped. 35 will be accepted by the prosecution. Out of that 35, 5 of those people are going to jump bail. They're going to leave. You're not going to even see them anymore. 30 of those cases will go to trial. Out of that 30, 3 is going to be acquitted. You'll have 23 that's going to plead guilty. 4 will be found guilty. 27 will be sentenced. Out of that 27, 9 of them will be placed on probation. Leaves you 18 adults that's going to go to jail. We started out with 1,000 serious crimes, whether they're going to be murder, whether they're going to be bank robbery, child abuse, spousal abuse. Only 18 of those adults and 5 of those juveniles will be incarcerated. I put this one up here. I'm not recruiting, but just if you ever decide you want to be a Shreveport police officer, the criteria: you must be 21, at least a high school diploma or equivalent. There's a series of tests you must take. This is before you even consider for employment. You have to take a civil service test, an extensive background test, applicant interview board. You have a psychological, you have a physical fitness, and all of this for $2,179 a month to start. But later after a year, you'll get $500 supplementary pay, which that'll boost you up. The best thing is that'll boost you up to about $2,600 a month. After you finish the academy, you've been on a year, you get an extra $100. You get $2,750 a month. That's to be a Shreveport police officer. The rules of the criminal justice system and the state and federal court, they're about the same. They govern the police, so the police have a certain criteria that they cannot step outside of their boundary. That's why so many law enforcement officers and the department get sued for civil rights violation. I speeded it up. That will conclude my interview. I thank y'all for listening. Thank you for having me. My name is Otis.